our biggest thank you is going to be to Dr. Horner, and I'm going to have the honor of introducing him. Dr. Horner is a professor from the University of Oregon in the Special Education Department. He has a plethora of research and written materials behind the work that he's been doing for the last 20 or so years in the role of PBIS. He and Dr. George Sagai are really the two that have sparked this whole movement across our nation. And in California, we are deeply indebted to Dr. Horner because he has never given up on us. He stays with us, he stays encouraging us, he stays opening doors, and he stays a tremendous advisor to our California PBIS Coalition and to CalTAC. So with no further ado, we're really here to hear Dr. Horner. Please invite and welcome Dr. Horner to California.
That's good. All right, good morning. Hey, we're going to have a good time today. So this sounds like it's a forum and a lot of work, but today is a day for you to shift gears, to work together as teams, and to really look at ways in which you're going to change your school, but not just your school, your whole district. Because part of what we know is high schools really are the pivot within school districts. So I want you to really be pleased by that. I want to start by really doing a more formal thank you to Barb and Christy. The idea of pulling this together takes a lot of work, a lot of vision, a lot of coordination. So one, the fact that you had the good vision to focus specifically on high schools. And second, the dedication and the work you've done, not just for the conference, but for the work where you're pulling things together. We extend appreciation. Thank you. All right. Now, I really want you to be excited about the fact that we're going to be talking about high schools. Right now, within the United States, high schools are the pivotal area where K-12 reform and effort is really occurring. People all across the country are worried about dropout rates, they're worried about graduation rates, they're worried about the extent to which we can actually educate successfully all the kids. Every one of us in high schools, you can see some of the kids who are doing really well, but there's this group, there are in fact several groups, where we're missing. We're not really getting to the place where we need to be. So today's an opportunity to take a deep breath, take a little bit of a look at what you're really going to be able to focus on now through the end of this year, but I really want you to be thinking about how you're going to launch next year and really get things going. I've got two tasks. My first is to provide a context for everything that's going to be happening. A context in terms of how does PBIS fit both nationally and within California, and especially how does this stuff relate to high schools? Many of you have heard things about positive behavior support and implementation in elementary and middle schools, but it always sounds a little too young, right? So this is really the time to ratchet up and say, okay, come on, how do we really do this? How do we make this work? So I'm going to give a little bit of context. I'm going to give you some data, I'm going to give you some ideas, but there are themes that are going to cut across. One of the themes that I want you to look at is the extent to which we're moving away from control and discipline, and we're really moving much more towards education and empowerment. The bottom line for everything you're going to hear today is that we can't make high schools work without the active engagement and participation of the students. We're going to be talking about specific strategies for you to lead students in building a coherent and effective learning community. And part of that, now this is really important, is holding students accountable. This isn't just, I mean, I got to tell you, I always worry. I always worry when people first come to a PBIS event. You know, you talk about positive behavior support, and it all, I mean, isn't it so nice, warm, cozy, everybody gets together, has a group hug, we hope they get better, right? All right. There's a certain amount of that, but I really want you to take away the sense that PBIS is about defining expectations and everybody holding each other accountable. It's not just us being educational police, it's everybody within a community holding each other accountable. Now, the big thing that I want to take away though is if you teach algebra or calculus or physics, or if you are really focused on a group, part of what I want you to think about, I'm going to make the argument today that you will not accomplish the graduation rates, the academic outcomes, the social emotional development that you're committed to, unless PBIS is part of the process that you're doing. The thing that Barb was so gracious about describing when she introduced us were the things that we've done as academics. But the thing that I really value, all of us who are involved in PBIS were teachers. I was actually a special ed teacher in Palo Alto, all right? I know that's a different state. That's the northern part, right? So some of you may not know where Palo Alto is. It's in the Bay Area, all right? But it is still actually part of California. Here's the point. The point is we are committed to things that are practical, that are efficient, and that are evidence-based. That's what we're going to give you, all right? Now, how many of you have been to a PBIS conference before? Excellent, 39.8%. And so that means a fair number of you, this is a little bit new. You got what the acronym is, but if someone were to say, we will give you 2 tickets to Disneyland if you can identify the 7 core features of PBIS, my bet is you wouldn't do it quite yet. All right, by the end of today, I want you to be able to do that. So here's the other part. I'm going to focus on 3 big things. So this is being a university professor. One of the things you learn is you have to tell everybody what's going to be on the test within the first 5 minutes, right? So the 3 big things. 1, I really want you to embrace this idea of a school-wide positive social culture. School-wide positive social culture. This is different than the way that most of us were trained. We were trained to help Elise and Darren behave well, right? We were teaching skills for those individual kids. And there's really important ways that you got to do that. But I'm going to argue that you can't do PBIS unless you think about your school as a learning community. And I want you to be thinking about how you are drawing kids into your community. So part of what this is going to be all about, how do you establish a learning community where the kids have engaged and they own the environment? Not only, but as part of it. Second, I really want you to see over and over again the way in which data use is something that guides what we're doing. So if you were to come away today, I want you to be able to say, what are the 4 things that you as a team really need to know? 4 things. If you were to say, what kinds of data are you able to really deal with? So do you know if you're actually implementing PBIS? Do you know the fidelity data? Do you know attendance? And come on, we got a big problem in the US with respect to attendance in high schools. I mean, how many of you are dealing with attendance issues? All right, I love it. My father was a superintendent of schools, and one of his major messages was if we don't get them there, we're not going to have the effect. So I want you to really focus on attendance, I want you to focus on behavior, and I want you to focus on class success, how well they're progressing through their classes. So in high school, if you as a team are to be able to implement PBIS, you need those 4 pieces of information. The issue is if you control the district, I want you to be thinking about the extent to which the district's database is giving you the information you need to make good decisions. So as we go forward, over and over again, the theme is going to be, how do we empower the team? How do we move things forward and make that work? The final part, and this is, I think there ought to be an award for whoever keeps track of who has seen the most triangles today. All right? So you see the triangle, and you only get to count one. If you got two screens, you only get one. But today you're going to see a lot of triangles. The key thing about the triangle is there's one key message: always focus on prevention first. We love to focus on the problems, but the multi-tiered system says, listen, start by telling us what we're doing for everybody. So here's actually something to write down. If you're doing PBIS, every student who enters your school receives behavior support. Every single one. We don't wait for people to foul up and then say, aha, you, cowboy, need behavior support. The whole idea is we're building prevention. Second is we don't operate on a one-size-fits-all. We know that some kids come from environments that just break your heart, all right? And we've got to provide the extra communication, the extra social, the extra academic supports for those kids to be successful. Now, we can't do that with everybody, but here's what I want you to be thinking of. I want you to be thinking of, do we have just one thing that works, and then we identify kids for whom it's not working, and we send them to the other place, right? Some place that, and come on, I can't tell you how many times I've been in these meetings where we talk about Erika, and we say, boy, she's really a wonderful kid, right? And we really think she has lots to offer. But we want to find a place that is really appropriate for her, preferably very far from us. You been in those meetings? Okay, here, come on now, knock it off. Here's what the triangle says. All kids, right? I want you to build the capacity so that you can ratchet stuff up. Part of that means, if you really do the multi-tiered piece, that you gear up early enough that we're delivering support so the kids can be successful. Come on, this is February. I want you to think about the number of kids that we are identifying as needing really significant help in February. If you really are implementing PBIS, 80% of your intensive behavior supports are in place by Halloween. All right? You identify and you intervene early. All right, so that is basically the whole day. So those of you who really just came for the raffle, right? You've got the big ideas. So here's what we want to do. For the 53% of you who are a little bit new to PBIS, I want you to get beyond the technology, and I want you to be able to take back a really big message. So here's one of the things that I'm worried about. Most of you are here as teams. You're not here all by yourself. Who's here with somebody else as part of your team? Yes, 89.4%. Good. Okay, here's what I want you to be thinking of. As a team, I want you to get the song that goes along with how we build social cultures. But I want you to also have the message of how you can take it back to everybody else. A big issue in high schools is your skill as a team to influence everybody else around you. You've got to start by being clear about what it is, and then you've got to give people tools. You should leave here today, by the end of today, I want you to have at least 3 specific tools that you will take back to your school. And different ones of you will take different things. Some of you will take counseling information from Jake. Others of you will take some of the issues around academic seminar from Chris Pinkney. There's a host of information around improving classrooms that Jessica Swain Bradway will offer. So partly, at least 3 specific things that you're going to take back. But in addition to that, I want you to say, how does it fit? So here you go. You ready? The whole purpose of PBIS, is to make schools more effective, efficient, and equitable learning environments. That's it. Don't make it complicated. I want you to think about your school as a learning environment. If we do PBIS well, it'll be more effective. Kids will actually succeed. Graduation rates will go up, performance on academic scores will go up, and their social emotional competence will improve. Second, I want you to be more efficient. Listen, remember that notion that all of us were former teachers? We are not excited about strategies that people give that sort of load more tasks on the backs of teachers. One of our rules is never adopt something new unless you identify what you're going to stop doing to make that possible and efficient. So as administrators, we're very interested in efficiency. My bet is that if you said, who amongst us doesn't have anything to do on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons to be part of another meeting, right? You don't see a lot of hand raises when you do that. People are already full. And I want you to think about that. So when we talk about linking social emotional, and we talk about linking some of the school mental health pieces, that doesn't mean we want you to take on a new job. That means we want you to link with additional resources in your communities. I got to tell you, one of the things you've got, California has one of the strongest foundations for combining mental health and education. We work in every state in the United States. Other states would kill for the access that you've got to effective community and family supports. And it is a challenge because when I work with schools in California, I'm impressed by how everybody is separating their side from this side from this side. Knock it off. We're not going to be able to produce the changes that we're interested in unless we get much better at putting things together. So part of what I really want you to do, I want you to become more efficient. The other part is equity. And you can deal with equity as a social justice issue. But listen, we can deal with equity as a pure, simple efficiency of the system. We've got kids who are coming from more different backgrounds than ever before in the history of education. Come on, I'm looking out. I can see some of you were in the educational system a while ago, okay? Nope, all right. I want you to think about how it was when we were there. Schools are not as we remember. They are as they are now. And part of our talent has got to be to make 21st century schools. That's what we want to do today. If you were to take all of the research, I mean, one of the things we do, we hold ourselves accountable for not asking you to do something unless we've actually done the research to show that it makes a difference. You can come on. Anybody who can do a PowerPoint can make something look fun and exciting. The trick is, can you actually demonstrate that it produced change in kids and families? So part of what I want to do is if you were to take the last 40 years of research and condense it down so it says, what will make a school an effective learning environment? I mean, we can do a lot. I'll show you some graphs here in just a minute. But here are the 4 things I want you to do. When you start school, I want you to create an environment that is excruciatingly predictable. I want you to create an environment where not just the highly privileged, well-educated, 2-parent family kids know what they're doing. I want you to create an environment where every single kid, every single student knows what the expectations are. They know it in a language that they understand and embrace. And they know it not just as a word, but as actually what it looks like. What does this feel like? Open up the door. Don't make school appear like an opaque environment managed by people unlike me. Make it your home. Make it a predictable environment. Second, and this is the toughest one, because every one of us were trained to make our own classroom or our own domain our own. All right? When I was a teacher, my first day of teaching, I was taken into room 19, and the principal opened up the door and said, "This is your room, these are your kids. God bless you and good luck." All right, that's not the orientation I want you to give. I want you to actually do more. Part of it is we've got to make school from the perspective of the students. Make it easy for students to see the consistency. I mean, each of us are going to be a little bit different, the way that we do things. That's okay, that's normal. But the basic fundamental expectations, Cowboy, we expect you to treat others with respect. We expect you to be responsible for yourself. And this is what that means. We expect you to behave with dignity and honor or whatever. And this is what that means. Make the puzzle accessible. Make it clear. And part of that, I got to tell you, when we talk with kids, and we do, golly gee, we do lots and lots of interviews with kids. The thing that they are most interested in is the extent to which we are fair, right? The F word, right? Are we fair? And part of what that means is consistency across people, place, and time. All right, third thing is I want you to actually create a positive environment. Create an environment where we are telling them over and over what they've done right. Part of that means you should never correct a behavior that you haven't taught the positive side to. So if you should never correct, never say you got it wrong unless you've actually taught them what to do that's right. So if you say this is the way it goes, then the correction isn't do not do that because you are a miserable wretch and you're going to go straight to hell. All right, that's one option. The other option is to say, Cowboy, that is not what we taught. Remember when we said be respectful? So pulling your pants down is not being respectful, right? Let's talk about what an alternative would look like. Okay, so impart, teach and acknowledge. Teach and acknowledge. And one of the things you're going to hear over and over again, teach and acknowledge 4 to 5 times as often as you correct. If you do that, the kids will identify the environment as positive. We actually ask. One of the things we do, and you do this too with the California Healthy Kids checklist survey. You ask to what extent are adults in the environment encouraging. You've got different ways in which kids tell us, and we get big differences when you look across different schools. The other piece, and I got to tell you, this is a big one right now, is safety. Because safety has 2 parts. One is the reality and the other is the perception. You actually have already created very safe environments for the most part. Your environments are good. I mean, I've been in a lot of schools in California, and I think you have a huge amount to be proud of. The students don't identify the schools as safe as we do. Partly that's because of bullying, harassment, partly it's because of the emergence of online social media challenges. But one of the things that we can tell you, and you're going to hear a lot of talk about brains and physiology, basically, if students believe they're safe, they are actually physiologically in a more learning receptive context. When kids perceive themselves as at danger, right? Part of what you've got is cortisol levels that actually alter the conditional probability that you're going to be comfortable attending. You're doing too much cycling in terms of what your attention looks like. So if I were to condense everything that I know about the science related to building social environments, focus it down on these 4 things. I want you to create environments that are predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. So if that's what we do, we start off by looking at these icons, the model of implementation. And this is where that model started with Bridget Flannery and Mimi Kato when they were first pulling this together. But this looks a little bit 20th century, so you all have emerged and modified this. The thing that's tricky is each one of these icons could actually be a whole day. I mean, we could spend a whole day on each one of them. So I want you to really appreciate what Barb and Christy have done. Those of you who are interested, take a look up there. There's one thing that says there are contextual variables that make high schools different, the size, the developmental level. There are also key foundational systems related to data and communication. There are core features. What are instructional practices? What are intervention practices? What are multiple tiers that work? And then there are some key things that we're actually learning about high school interventions that make a difference. Especially, I love the academic seminar piece, and I love some of the ways. Here's the basic message in that last part. Never intervene behaviorally without combining it with academic support. Don't pretend that you can deal with behavior problems and there will be nothing related to academics. So in part, anytime you're dealing with a student who's behaviorally challenging, I want you to look at ways in which you add in the academic support so that she or he is doing much better. Now, if you look at what's going on, I mean, we're going to have Barb and Christy talking about how you can combine those pieces of preventing, teaching, and reinforcing. We're going to be looking for different ways of problem solving that look at the systems. We're going to be introducing the role of counselors. And Jake actually does not just counselors. He can talk about counselors, social workers, school psychologists. So the idea is we need the related services people braided with the work that's already going. I want you to take a look at focusing on freshmen. All right? I want you right now to start thinking about what August, September, and October of 2018 are going to look like. And when the kids walk in who are freshmen, I want you to think about what they're going to do. One of the messages we can give you, the success of freshmen starts probably in 7th grade. Definitely the transition in 8th grade. I want you to be thinking about what you would like your 8th graders to know before they start next year. And part of what I can tell you, again, we've done lots of interviews with kids in 8th grade going into 9th grade. They are scared to death. They are really worried. You know, that's a little overstatement. They are worried about how that's going to work. All right, so partly take a look at that. You're going to have opportunities to look at the whole implementation system, classroom pieces, and then the braiding. Academic seminar really cuts across a whole lot of different pieces. Okay, now remember, you all are here as teams. 89.3% of you are here sitting with teams. So here are 3 things I want you to take away as a team. First off, today, don't just go to sessions, talk to each other. I want you to build consensus. I want you to have a common message. What is our goal? What are the critical features of what we're going to put in place? And how will we know, 2 big questions, if we did what we said we would do and if it's benefiting students? So as a team, one of the things, you will not function as a team just because your administrator said you all are the PBIS team. That does not make a team. You've got to have a common vision, you've got to have a common understanding of what you're doing, and you need common experience. I want you today to become more of a team. I want you to be able to trust each other in terms of what we're talking about. Our goal is to build an effective learning community that makes our school a more effective, efficient, and equitable learning environment. Got it? All right? You're going to need to say that to be able to get lunch. All right? All right. Now, the second thing is I really want you to start thinking about how you're going to recruit students better. I mean, come on. How many times have we done things where we told them what to do and it didn't resonate? Da-dum. Okay? One of the big things about PBIS is it's not about control, it's about empowerment. I want you to be looking at how you're going to draw students in. Here's really the key. Come on, the reality is there are more of them than there are of us. Okay? I mean, gear up. We will not create an effective learning environment unless you've got the students expecting appropriate behavior from each other. You need students in the school expecting appropriate behavior from each other. Now, the good news, we do surveys all the time, and we ask the kids, we ask the students, you know, you have put PBIS in your school. Was this a good thing? Is this something that we should do in the future? And the message that we get back, you know, you'll love this. Come on, as teachers, you'll love this. First off, they uniformly say, my gosh, yes, this is a good thing. We're surprised you got your teaching certificate without knowing this. Okay? Yes, we want a coherent learning environment. We don't want to be controlled, but we want to know how to succeed. We want to know before. We don't want to be taught by punishing doing it wrong. We want you to teach us how to be successful. And then the one I love best is, you know, did you personally really benefit from this? And the answer is always, well, not always, especially with the males. It is, I personally did not need this. Being a highly mature, totally together young person. But I've got to tell you, I am really glad you did this for the miserable wretches who are all around me, who I got to tell you are just totally out of control, right? Now, that's got to ring true, right? All right, that's part of the arrogance of youth. We love that. Part of what I want you to do, I want you to establish student support. I want you to be figuring out how you're going to make that happen. No PBIS happens in high schools without the active engagement, solicitation, and involvement of the students. This is not what we do to them, it's what we do with them. And your way to make that work has got to fit your kids and your community. The other thing is, and this is the hardest one, I want you as a team to start thinking, if you can be clear among yourselves what you're trying to do, how do you take that message to the rest of the faculty? Do you do that in faculty meetings? Do you do that in announcements? Do you do that by recruiting? Once again, just as with students, you do not recruit the remainder of the faculty by telling them, we have been to a conference and we are bringing back God's truth. Or the worst one, the government has given us a good idea. Don't do that, all right? Instead, always, come on, as a team, start with what do we collectively want to accomplish. Never come back and say our goal is to implement PBIS. That is not the goal. The goal is to create an effective, efficient, and equitable learning environment. We do it through PBIS because it's the most cost-effective, evidence-based approach. This is not a religion. If you all can come up with a better, faster, cheaper way to do it, we are for it. We are not in this for a package. We're in it to create schools that are more effective, more efficient, and more equitable. Got it? Get that message to your people, and then everything else will go forward from there. All right, so how does this work? Now we're going to go a little bit faster, and you're going to have to look at graphs. All right? You can do this. This is all right. So in terms of, again, some foundational pieces for those of you who are getting used to PBIS, this is some information that one of our colleagues, Susan Barrett, actually proposed. One of the things I want you to think about, everything starts with student outcomes. Everything starts with student outcomes. So part of what we're looking for academic, social, attendance, and emotional gains. PBIS starts by saying we want to have effective outcomes for kids. All right, so we're going to measure that, and we're going to look at how it works. First thing we got to know is, well, what are the practices that generate those outcomes? What are the 3 things you can do to increase the conditional probability of improved attendance? What are the elements? There are 10 things that a classroom needs to have. If you do those 10 things, the likelihood that kids will show up and be engaged and actually pay attention change. What are they? So we know what the practices are. When you take a look at problem behavior, all right, and come on, think about the stuff. I mean, and I'll show you your own data in just a minute related to problem behavior. Part of what we know is I want you to be thinking, what do they do Where do they do it? When do they do it? Is it a few kids or a lot of kids, or is it just Jessica, right? Why do they keep doing it, and how often does it happen? If you ask those questions, right? If you ask those questions, you will be able to do problem solving that you never thought possible. So in part, we can tell you strategies that the research say work. There is no strategy that you don't need to adapt to your environment. It's your skill at adapting it that's going to make it work. The second part is I want you to actually create things that are functional. And that's going to come back to that message of prevention. Too often in high school, we come up with a discipline code. We come up with a set of the 2,438 things you should not do. You know, no hats, no gum, no pants above or below certain places. No, you've got to have some proportion of your anatomy covered. We've got all of these different things. I want you to start shifting. Here's the message. All good social environments start by teaching what you want. Never have a negative consequence that's not attached to having taught the right foundation. You don't have to teach this is how you dress. You teach concepts. These are kids who are young adults. They want basic concepts. Show us how being respectful and responsible apply. Give them power, not narrow control. Come on, and those of you who like to do the brain stuff, we actually have done. I mean, I used to sit on the NIH study section looking at the genetic and neural development material. One of the things I love, there's actually a study done where they were looking at young adults. I think they were 14, 15, 16 were the age range. And one of the questions was, if you tell somebody no hats, right? Hat is a great thing because we put 19 probes. There's a guy named Posner, actually, there's 19 is the minimum. They actually do many more right now, but when I was doing it, we had 19. And we could actually say hat, and we could see in the brain where the hat neurons fired, all right? It was a blast. You're actually sitting there watching, oh, there's hat, right? So we'd say hat. And so part of what you say is in an adolescent, especially an adolescent male, if you say no hats, got it? You know what fires in the brain? What fires is how close can I get? What about yarmulkes? What about scarves, right? What about caps? What about, right? So part of what you do neurophysiologically is you actually prompt barrier approximation. Don't do that. Instead, I want you to teach what you want. Always teach what you want and go from there. The other part, so do prevention first. The other part that we really have learned is when you're looking at these things, build a multiple tier of support. Some kids are going to deal with just being taught what's expected, then you're going to need other parts. The point is, you need practices, and you need practices that actually work. Behaviorally, what we're saying is make the practices functional, make them preventive, actively teach what you want, and be prepared to increase intensity to meet kids' needs. The other thing, though, that I want you to be excited about, this is really important. Too often in education, we're given programs, and we're supposed to go out and implement these programs. We're supposed to sweat blood to get something in place, only to have it replaced by what you went to the next year, right? Have you ever been there? It doesn't take too many cycles of implementing something, having it go away, having it go away till you can't do it very long. All right, here's the rule. In PBIS, never put something in place that you don't expect to last for a minimum of a decade. All right, 10 years. Everything you hear today, I want you to say, what's the practice? And then, what are the organizational systems that are necessary to sustain it with fidelity and effect for a decade? What that means in education, don't tell us what to do as a team unless you give us the data, the time, the authority and the structure to be able to be successful. My father was a superintendent. I don't want you ever to think about practices that don't affect what happens in the district. As a team, I want you to be really good at describing among yourselves what you want to accomplish. I want you to become much more effective at taking that vision to students and faculty. But at the same time, I want you to be clear about what you need from the district, the county, and the region. I want you to be expecting the organizational support that'll be able to sustain things. To do that well, you need data. You need 4 different kinds of data. 1, you need fidelity. 2, you need attendance. 3, you need behavior. 4, you need academic performance in class. To do good decision making in schools, you need 4 kinds of data. And you need to be able to make those data into functional decisions. So, this is what PBIS is. It starts with student and family outcomes. It's practices, organizational systems, and data. Everything else you hear is going to make it work from there. Now, one of the questions you got to say is, come on, this is California. I mean, we do lots and lots of different things. In fact, I got to tell you, you all have more different programs going on in California than any other state we work with. And the other thing is, you do most of them poorly. All right? I can say that only because I go to other places. One of the messages, do fewer things, do them brilliantly. Don't add new stuff unless you identify what you're going to stop doing. Listen, when I was in Palo Alto, I got sent away to behavior management workshops on a regular basis. Remember how we used to have somebody get sent away? We didn't do it as teams, we did it as individuals. And I would come back with a 3-ring glossy binder. And my job was to inoculate the rest of the staff. And I was actually pretty good. I would get everybody together. And I never went to a workshop I didn't think was great, that's a different story. But, so here's what I got to tell you. You're here today. There are people back in school that are worried. She's going to come back with a 3-ring glossy binder in a Google Doc folder, right? Oh, God, we sent her there once before. All right. So part of what I want you to come back with, I want you to come back with a sense that this fits what you need, it's doable, and it'll make not only your life, but the community better. We've done this before. This is a count of the number of schools just in the United States that are implementing school-wide positive behavior support. There are 25,000 schools doing this. All right, there are about 108,000 schools in the United States. So we're working with 1/4 of all schools in the United States. And you got to say, well, how many high schools? Well, we're working with over 3,000 high schools. And you say, well, this is California. We do things differently. That's exactly what they say in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Kansas City, New Mexico. All right? We work with little tiny schools in the middle of nowhere up in the New Mexico mountains. We also work with schools in inner city Manhattan that have 4,400 kids on 5 floors, okay? So different places, different ways of doing things. But the key is this common vision of making things work. We are doing PBIS in lots of places. In addition, one of the things that we've been working on the past decade has been implementing PBIS outside of the country. We currently work with 23 different countries. And so in part, one of the reasons for doing that is really testing cultural responsivity and sensitivity. Can you do it in South Africa? Can you do it in New Zealand and Australia? Can you do it in Iceland and Norway? Of course, you know, the president always wants us to be bringing people from Norway. So we've been there. All right. Now, I don't know. Listen, that's a really bad idea. There are not that many of them. You know, I mean, they'd all fit in California. So, very nice people, though. All right. Here's what I want you to take away. I want you to take away the sense that you can make this work. And I want you to take away a sense this is not something we are bringing to you to get money or get something. We don't need this. We're doing this because it works. Here's what the research says. You ready? Here's what the research says. If you implement PBIS with fidelity, now listen, hear the word fidelity. This doesn't mean we bought a poster. This means we actually implement it with fidelity. You get a 20 to 60% reduction in problem behavior. You'll get an increase in pro-social behavior and in the social emotional competence of the kids. Now what that means, the students get better at interacting with each other and with us. And we do a good job as adults teaching students in school to comply. We do a less good job as adults teaching students to interact successfully with us. We do not teach our students how to respond if they find themselves in conflict. We don't teach them how do you raise an issue or a concern. We teach compliance, and that is one of the big problems we run into. All right, part of what we've also got, improved academic achievement. And in all fairness, we've done this with elementary and middle schools. We don't have this particular outcome in high schools. Improved perception of school safety. One of the things I love, students and faculty in schools that use PBIS identify the school as a safer environment. In Portland Public Schools in Oregon, the Union of Portland Public School Teachers required that the school board receive training in PBIS because, now listen, I love this, because they were convinced that implementing PBIS made the schools safer, not just for students, but for adults. Now, I actually had I was written in to the union contract. You are forced to have Rob Horner come and train. That's a lousy way to do it. But I like the basic idea, right? The fact that they're looking at safety. We also get improved organizational health. So schools that implement PBIS are perceived as more effective environments. Now, those of you who are administrators, I want you to pay attention to this one. If you implement PBIS, you will, over a 3-year period, get a reduction in staff turnover. Staff turnover is one of the hidden expenses that make life much more difficult. In Oregon, one of the problems we've got 60% of the schools in Oregon implement PBIS. One of the problems we have is there are teachers who will not move to a school that does not implement PBIS. All right? I want you to think about those social metrics. So partly decrease the staff turnover. The other piece, Scott Ross, who is currently in Colorado, did a study in which he demonstrated that implementation of PBIS changed the extent to which teachers perceive themselves as being more academically successful. I can be a better teacher in schools that use PBIS. So this is what the research shows. And recently, we're fortunate to have Patty here from Maryland, and she has worked with colleagues in Maryland who have looked very carefully at implementation of PBIS. And they've just published a couple of studies, which I encourage you to download off of the PBIS.org website. But here's essentially what they say. In randomized controlled trials, that means in real experiments, PBIS was related to reduction in suspensions, reduction in truancy, and improved reading and math proficiency in secondary schools. All right? So part of what I want you to take away, this is not something that we're just pretending. This is something that we've actually been working on for 25 years. In California, here are the number of schools implementing PBIS. There are over 2,500 schools in California that are implementing PBIS. And as I'm sure each of you know, there are 10,138 schools in California. So I want you to be thinking, but take a look at the graph. Take a look at the graph. And here is when, remember when the LCAP, come on, you all remember when the legislature what the LCAP introduced is the idea that we are absolutely about academic performance. We want to create kids that are college and career ready. But we also want to create young men and women who have the social emotional competence to be successful citizens. Social outcomes are part of what we're expected to do in education. And the LCAP is one of the first places where a legislature mandated that. Anytime you say, what is our school about? It is about building young men and women who are socially, instructionally, technically competent. We're building people who have increased degrees of freedom when they look at their career, at their college opportunities. So that made a difference. Many of you are actually receiving money from the School Climate Transformation Grant. There are 15 districts in California with multiple millions of dollars that are receiving federal funding. And this next year will be your last year. Those of you with School Climate Transformation Grants, part of what I encourage you to do is start looking at sustainability. All right, so look at how you're going to be able to keep things going. The last big deal is the state of California right now is investing $30 million in this whole notion of multi-tiered systems. Now you're going to hear a lot of words. Multi-tiered systems is exactly the same as the triangle. It applies to academics as well as to behavior. PBIS is a multi-tiered system that focuses primarily on the social behavior of students. But right now, schools in California are implementing. Well, that's cute, but now let's get down to some of the real stuff. So here are your data. These are data only around high schools that are implementing PBIS. How many of you have participated in a tiered fidelity inventory review? Excellent. God, I love it. You are good. I want you to release beta endorphins right now. Feel good about yourself. All right. Here's the big deal. The tiered fidelity inventory gives you 3 scores that are really important. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. You have implemented PBIS with sufficient fidelity to produce change in kid outcomes when you get to 70%. These are data from one district in California showing that they have focused with Barb and Christy on Tier 1 and they've moved to Tier 2. But let me show you individual schools. So here, these are individual high schools. So here's one high school. I want you to look at the dark blue bar. Dark blue bar is Tier 1, right? So there's 70%. So the school started at a certain spot. They did training, and the second year, they implemented Tier 1 PBIS. Hot spit, great, right? So we now have the prevention and the initial pieces going. Then look at the yellow bar, sort of the sickly yellow bar. Right? The yellow bar was when they started working on Tier 2. They started doing check-in, check-out, adapted for high school. And they actually got Tier 2 in place, but look at Tier 1. Tier 1 kept going. So they are now doing Tier 1 and Tier 2. What are they working on this year? Yes, very good, Tier 3. So they are putting pieces in place, but they're doing it slowly enough that they're actually sustaining what they're doing. All right, here's another school. Look at Tier 1, same story. Look at how they popped up with Tier 2. You know why they popped up? Because they have a very strong link with the mental health, school mental health group. Very strong, a school in which the administration invested in building the relationship. They are now also, partly because they're part of the same district, focusing on Tier 3. But here's another story, and this is a story I want you to think about. So look at the blue bar. In the beginning, there was Tier 1, and we did Tier 1 to 78% fidelity. And we felt good about ourselves, and we launched Tier 2. And we did do Tier 2, and while doing Tier 2, Tier 1 went to hell. Because No, come on. We thought we had done it. We did tier 1. Isn't it all about getting the score? No, it's not about getting the score. It's about changing the social environment to be more effective, efficient, and equitable, right? Here's the story from this school. Every year, you should take time to stop and say, how are we doing with what the core features are? By doing the tiered fidelity inventory, do it as a way to do training for new team members. Do it as a way to celebrate what you're doing well. And come on, high school people, come on, you are the harshest on yourselves. You do a lot of self-flagellation. Knock it off. Anytime you look at graphs, I always want you to identify 2 things that are positive before you focus on the thing that you're going to work on. And when you present the data to your faculty, always focus on 2 things that are positive before you get into things. So here's for example, the school that I'm just looking at. These are their tier 1 data for a couple of years. And this is all way too small, but it's not that I want you to read it, it's that I want you to look up there and say, it's real clear what we did well, right? We can see what we did well. And if somebody were to say, what are the smallest number of changes that'll make the biggest difference in the quality of the school? We can identify it. That's what data do for you. It allows you to make good decisions, and more than that, come on, I want you to look, we got 400 people here. We would get agreement on what was happening that was doing well and what we needed to focus on simply by looking up there. I want you to think about, have you ever been in a team meeting where you spent 45 minutes discussing something and never really coming up with a conclusion? Now, I'm sure that never happens here, but in Oregon, we do that. Come on. I want you to think about this. The people in your team meetings are competent. They are intelligent. They're clever. I want you to give people the data, the system, and the structure for being more successful than they would otherwise be. That's what PBIS is all about. Now, I want you to take away some things to make you feel good. So here's some issues. These are office discipline referrals, major office discipline referrals in high schools that are looking at PBIS over the last 13 years. Implementing PBIS in 1 year is neat. Doing it for multiple years, you get a decreasing trend. I want you to be thinking about the fact that if students are in freshman year and they go through it, that's going to benefit the whatever proportion are still there in sophomore, junior, and senior. So part of what you're looking at is I want you to be talking about the fact that if we do this, things get better. Reduction in problem behaviors. Second, one of the biggest deals is graduation rates. Come on, as a nation, we really need to gear up. These are US figures, and we keep getting hammered by low graduation rates. Oregon, for example, has one of the lowest graduation rates. Partly that is because our legislature has cleverly decreased the number of days that kids go to school. So it's very interesting. If they don't go to school, they turn out to be much less likely to learn the material. Now, who would have thought? Come on, all right. But look, I want you to look at this. This is graduation rates. Increasing as a nation, here's California. These are your graduation rates. So, yes, we've got areas that we can improve, but you're getting better. And not only are you getting better, come on, you are actually getting better for a wider range of kids. This is dropout rates by ethnicity. The top graph are kids who are Latino Hispanic. The green bar are kids who are from African American backgrounds. So look at the giant separations, the disproportionality in our success. But look at how it's decreasing as you get further to the right. Listen, the efforts that you are putting in to building schools with equity is really important, and it's working. The other thing I can tell you, some of you, the 38% of you who were here last year, One of the things that you heard is you heard Kent McIntosh talk about ways in which PBIS helps build effective, equitable environments. Part of it is, I want you to be careful. We do not believe that by itself, PBIS is the only thing you need. We believe that PBIS is a piece of that puzzle. These are data that are brand new. Nobody's seen these yet. One of the things that it does is it compares in the dark bars the effects of the discipline rates for students of different ethnicities, both before with schools that did not implement PBIS in the dark bars and schools that did implement PBIS in the green bars. Lower bar is advantageous. This shows two things. Thing number one is it still shows that as a nation, we are doing less well with kids from African American backgrounds. But what it shows is schools that are implementing PBIS are systematically better. Here's what we're learning. If you're really committed to equity, do this. Focus first on the quality of your instructional systems. Are you making instruction accessible? Part of what we've learned is really well-privileged, intelligent kids can learn even with poor instruction. Kids who come from varying backgrounds, kids who have difficulty learning, learn when you teach well. Teach with clearly developed scaffold curriculum. Teach with unambiguous instruction. When you do that well, it makes a difference. Use PBIS. Create a social culture that is predictable, consistent, positive, and safe. Collect and disaggregate data. So one of the questions I would have, do you have data that are no more than 1 week old that allow you to look at the attendance, academics, and behavior of kids in your school? If you don't, you need to give us heck. You need to tell us that we need to give you better data. We are not giving you the information that you need for good decision making. Now here are the two that are going to be most controversial. The first is we actually have in our nation, we have explicit bias. We have people who actually believe different things. We should not be changing what people believe, but we should say, you may believe whatever you want, but in this system, you can't operate and behave that way. So we need policies that control explicit bias. And then the other part, and the newest, is the whole focus on implicit bias. We've got clear designation that people who want to do well inadvertently behave in ways that are biased, either with race or gender or disability or any of a variety of other characteristics. Basically, implicit bias is something that sort of grows on us. One of the things that we've learned, implicit bias is more likely when you make a quick, emotionally laden decision. There are things that Kent McIntosh calls vulnerable decision points. You can actually learn to control implicit bias. So part of what we're saying, you want to build schools that are equitable learning environments? These are the 5 features that we're looking at. We're doing systematic studies in Oregon and Michigan right now. So this is work that is not complete. So I'm telling you things that we think, not things that we can prove. In your situation, these are high school data. What are the problem behaviors you all see? So this is, of all the problem behaviors in California, what's the proportion? This is basically, the message is that truancy and tardiness account for 42% of the exciting problems. All right, you can get defiance and disruption, 22%. But we've got lots of work to do in terms of making things work. So, and if for those of you who are dealing with politicians, here's a couple of quick pieces of information. Dropout in California, kids dropping out, cost the state about $45 billion annually. So a student who drops out, on average in their lifespan will consume about $380,000 more than if they graduated. So I want you to think about when she's about ready to drop out, it actually would be cost effective if we added additional resources to keep her in school. I mean, this is a big deal. All right, so now, what does the system tell us? Here we go. We've got 20 minutes. I want you to take away 3 things. And these are the 3 things that you're going to have elements that go along with in the sessions today. So this is the Preventing Dropout in Secondary Schools manual that the U.S. Department of Education developed after doing a series of syntheses and meta-analyses and songs and dances. All right? Condense it down to this. 3 big messages. 1, establish a positive school-wide social culture. Make your school a place where kids want to come. Build a system where the students expect appropriate behavior from each other. 2nd, collect and use data. And the student data follow the ABCs that Bridget Flannery and Mimi have given us. Attendance, behavior, classroom progress. I'm adding another one, which is fidelity. All right? And then whatever you do, if you're really committed to equity, one of the things you will do is build a system that will be responsive even for those kids who need more intense support. That's true if they're learning algebra. It's also true if they're getting behavior support. So let's do this really fast. Here you go. Establishing a social culture. Part of what I want you to be thinking of, if you're going to be successful at establishing a positive culture, you're going to give kids a clear path to success. I mean, they're going to be worried about what they're doing, so make it really clear. Every single student should be able to identify at least one adult who knows and cares about what they're doing. Those of you who are administrators, ask each kid, who's your advocate, right? Who is your advocate? Or use whatever word fits your community, right? But if you can't figure out the adult who really cares about you, that's a big deal. In fact, it is one of the strongest predictors of whether a student will drop out. So I want you to think carefully about that. All this stuff about relationships is okay. I need to know that you know who I am and you actually care, whether I'm going to be able to make it or not. The other thing that we underestimate is I need a peer group that actually wants me to succeed, not a peer group that wants me to go and do drugs. I need a peer group that actually says, come on, we don't have to go and do study sections. We just need to say, what'd you get on number 5? You got square root of 19. How did you do that, right? See what happens? I'm simply showing that I care, that I'm interested. All right, so if you're going to do that, I'm arguing that I want you to build a social culture. And in PBIS terms, here's what happens. When you build a positive social culture, if you're going to be a member, right? 1, I want you to have common language, not English. I want you to have the words that we all agree on. We're going to be socially responsible, honorable, dignified, respectful. What are the words? But I need not just the words. I do need to know what the words are, because the words are signals, right? I also need to know what they mean. So it is not good enough to have somebody say, we are respectful, responsible, and socially just. The hot spit, good for you. What the heck does that mean, right? Show me what that means. See the common vision? Common vision means you can translate it into behavior. In the cafeteria, what does it mean? And when we used to do this, I did this in Arizona in a small community that was close to a Native American reservation. And I was doing this thing, I was dressed like this, talking to them about school-wide expectations and all that. And afterwards, this local guy came up and patted me on the back, and he said, You know, overdressed white guy, that was really great. But I got to tell you, we've actually been doing this for 450 years. And I love that. And I said, well, you know, what are the core values? And he told me, and I couldn't say the words, but I said, you know, come on, translate. What does it mean? And it basically was be honorable and be brave. So we had the Native American elders come into the school and teach that history about being honorable and being brave. But then we had the teachers show what being brave and honorable meant in the cafeteria. Because it's not just, you know, walking around being brave and honorable. It actually is doing stuff. So you got to have the vision, all right? Here's the big one. Here's the one that we don't do. I want you to make the school-wide expectations public. I want us to have common experience. You do not build a social community by taking each individual kid and teaching him or her the expectations. You do it by doing it together. We become a community because I know that you know that I know. Right? Remember? I want you to empower the kids so they expect appropriate behavior from each other. I want them to know we don't do that. What are the rules for social texting? What's okay and what's not okay? When do you send an abusive, negative comment about somebody else to a third person? When do you not do that? Why do you not do that? We have not taught what those actually mean. We like to talk about big constructs, but we don't teach them as actual discriminal constructs that translate into behavior. Translate it into behavior and make a community. Here's what I want you to think about. Come on. And those of you who really work with freshmen, you know this. They walk in looking at high school as a daunting and complicated path. And you say, listen, this is what I want you to do. And they look at it like, whoa, man, I do not have a clue where to go, right? And different ones use different images, but it gets pretty bizarre, okay? I want you to make things work. So here you go. I want you to define and teach school-wide expectations. And what I've got is a set of great videos, none of which work with the current system. So I was going to sort of show them, but that doesn't work very well either. Here's the messages. 1, never adopt school-wide expectations without the active participation and engagement of the students. You can survey the students, you can suggest things and get feedback. The words need to resonate. Be careful. Come on, those of you who are in heavily gang-based environments, the word respect has been tainted. Don't use respect, but use the concept. What's another word for treating other people in a manner where you recognize that your behavior affects them? You can come up with that. You can talk about being considerate. You can come up with different words. Use words that fit, that resonate, but translate the words into behaviors. So define a small number, not 19, 3 to 5. Make them positive, not negative. So tell us what to do, not what not to do. The second part is never be so presumptuous to think that you know what it is and you don't need the kids. That level of presumption is dangerous. The other thing that I can tell you, and some of you have been doing this long enough, in general, you need to repeat this about every 4 to 5 years. So think about a cohort of students. Nobody graduates without having gone through the process of seeing the expectations redefined. Now, don't get all upset. That doesn't mean that you need to change the big word, but so tell me what being considerate or kind or socially responsible. Tell me what that means. And translating what that means several different times is okay. Don't change the word, change what it looks like. And have people be engaged. The other thing I would really encourage, I'm interested in those of you who are, anybody who's from Cal State who wants to do a dissertation, a great one would be to look at the effects of videos. Here's what we're learning. When you show a video that includes the students describing what's going on, one, it is much more powerful, which means it changes their behavior more if they see somebody who's their age. It doubles in effect. It is twice as effective if they see somebody they know. It is twice as effective. And it even increases more if they see themselves doing it, right? So, come on, one of the things you've got, we can make videos now for almost nothing. But the trick is, make videos that have the word, doing it the right way, and then contrast doing it the right way with the most common error that your kids make. This is what it is, this is what it looks like, and sweetheart, this is not it. You got it? This is not it. This is what it looks like. That's teaching. Do that with video, and you're going to be much more likely to get the kinds of effects that we're looking for. So I want you to think, one of the things that I would like you to do today is I actually want you to, as a group, say, what are our school-wide expectations? I mean, that would be, the secret handshake, the secret PBIS handshake is, hi, my name's Rob, what are your expectations? School-wide social expectations, right? All right, so the other thing is, how did students participate? It is, and come on, I know you're thinking, oh gosh, this is going to take forever. Do this pretty much the fast way. You've got some student leaders, you can do surveys, you can get feedback. Basically, here's the message. If you include them in the process, they will play. If you do it to them, they will just let it go. So part of what we're learning, make it happen. The other thing is I want you to walk into schools. And I know different people are doing posters and things in the hallway, and that's cool, but come on. I want you to come up with expectations that are going to last how long? Decade. All right? Make it real. Here are real high schools. I want you to define it. I want you to display it. I want you to revisit it. You don't have to revisit it every year. But I want you to come back. It's part of what you as a team are able to do. So here's a task. Today is Thursday, right? On Monday, here's your task. I actually want you to do this. I want you to, as a team, I want you to come back and do this. I want you to walk down the hall, and I want you to stop 5 different kids. 5 different kids in your school. Got it? And I want you to say, do you know what the expectations are? And you use whatever the real words are. Do you know the high fives or do you know the whatevers? But you say, do you know the expectations? Can you tell me what they are? Second, right? What does it look like right where we are? What does that mean? So translate it into real behavior. And then the third one. Has anybody acknowledged you for doing things right in the past 2 weeks? 5 kids. And then as a team, I want you to get together, and I want you to say, what'd you hear? What'd you hear? What'd you hear? In schools that actually implement PBIS, 80% of the kids should be able to answer these 3 questions. And I love the last one. Sometimes they get confused about whether they were, you got to use language that fits. I did this in the Netherlands. And I was in a school where they were implementing PBIS. And I talked to this one young lady, and I said, do you know the expectations? And she rattled them off. I said, well, what does it actually mean? And she did a great job. She had to stop and say, which language do you want? Do you want it in French, German, or English? And I thought, okay, don't show off. Just tell me what. And then I said, has anybody acknowledged you for doing things right in the past 2 weeks? And she thought, and she looked at me and she said, no. I said, really? And she said, no. I said, well, what do you think we should do? And she said, I think you should give me your ticket back to America. And I said, that's a good place to start negotiating, but maybe not. So, but I love that. right? Okay, no, seriously. I want you to think about a school where everybody could answer those questions. That's a community. All right, I want you also to invest in freshmen. I really want you to worry about the freshmen because, I mean, this is really true. The first 6 months of high school basically are killers. We lose too many kids. And Bridget and Mimi have been leading us. And part of what they've taught us, they taught us some really big things. Within the first 2 to 4 weeks, so come on, this is the part I want you as a team to be thinking about next fall. By the 4 weeks of when school starts, can every freshman tell you what it takes to graduate? They've actually got the little chart. They haven't just been given a piece of paper. They can tell you, you got to do this and this and this. You need so many credits and you need whatever it is. And the issue is not, do they know the rule? The issue is, do they have a path? Do they have a path that they can follow? And the key is, the path needs to take you down to right now. It's not what's going to happen in 4 years. It's what's going to happen in 4 years means this is what I'm going to do now. The second thing, I got to tell you, and this is true in Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, Connecticut, even in Maryland, Patty, isn't it? All right. Maybe not in California, but in other places, kids are not organized. No, I know you think not here, but it's true. Okay, come on. We have not done a good enough job of saying, how do you take a big task and make it a series of little tasks that work? We haven't taught people how to do planning. Come on, this is not just family planning, this is life planning. This is today planning. We have not given people the tools to move forward. And of all the things, listen, of the things that differentiate socioeconomic status, the extent to which you come from a highly chaotic, unplanned context affects school. If you are committed to equity, you need to be committed to teaching the skills. Everybody should have a binder. Everybody should have a schedule. Everybody should know a small number of core features. The study skills part gets a little more complicated, but at some point, just getting organized really makes a difference. The other piece is I believe every single freshman should be given 2 messages. At some point in your career, you will need help. We all need help. At some point in your education, you're going to need help. How do you get it? And don't say there's just one source of help. How do you get help from peers? How do you get help from us? How do you get help? Come on, call Jake, right? Your counselor actually can help you out. So in different ways, how do you organize to actually make things work? So the things that I want you to take away, invest in freshmen. I got to say over and over again, one of the things that I'm most excited about, when we talk to freshmen, this is the frame of their language. Have you ever talked to somebody who's a freshman? Say a coherent, full sentence. All right? Here's what I want you to do. Within 4 weeks, I want you to give them a clear path. It's not going to be clear and easy. I want everybody in 4 weeks. You can do this. You will not do it only as adults. You will need juniors and seniors. You will need others who say, this actually can work. You cannot convince the freshmen only with adults. But you can start there. Okay, 2 other key messages in 5 minutes. Message number 1, I want you to use data. And I've been giving you over and over again what the key things are. I want you to use data about the fidelity of what you're doing and the extent to which it impacts kids. So when you go back to your school, when you have a discussion at lunch, I know what everybody's going to discuss. What is the extent to which we have access and able to use the 4 core features of data? First, do you have your TFI data telling you if you're implementing PBIS? Can you tell me the extent to which you're implementing PBIS? Second, can you indicate the extent to which your team actually has data related to attendance? And it's not just, do we know generally what attendance is? We need to know today. We need to know fast. If you're going to deal with attendance, 1, you establish the expectation. 2, you have the data. 3, you respond to both being there and not being there. So if somebody is not there, they need to know that we will respond and respond quickly. Certainly the same day, maybe even faster. You've got the electronic support structures to make this work without becoming 1984. You can do this in a responsible, reasonable way. But part of it is we have under-attended to attendance. Yep. Okay, second, behavior. If you're going to deal with behavior, I want to know how often things are happening. So what are the major office discipline referrals in your school? Do you know the rate per day? Do you know who is doing it? Do you know what they are doing? Do you know when it's most likely? Do you know why they keep doing it? Do we have 5 kids who are creating social, basically chaos, or do we have 200 kids? Part of what you're going to see is you're going to see a bimodal distribution. You're going to see in a district, you get a whole bunch of problems with little tiny kids and a whole bunch of problems with 9th and 10th graders. All right? We've looked at the data. We can show you what it looks like. We can predict these patterns. Come on. If we can predict it, we can avoid it. I want you to give the people who have power to make decisions the data to make intelligent decisions. And part of what you're going to get today in the sessions are how, as a team, do you use data to make decisions? So those are the considerations that I want you to make. Last big message. The last big message that I want to give is to implement multi-tiered support. So this is the part where, as a team, I want you to be thinking, are we the Tier 1 team? What's the Tier 2, Tier 3 team? If we've got 2,300 kids, we may have a couple of Tier 3, Tier 2, Tier 3 teams. So I want you to be thinking about how to organize and how to make it work. Don't get stipulated on any one kind of triangle, right? So here are 3 variations of the triangle. The basic message of the triangle is start with prevention, build the capacity to implement with multiple levels of intensity, and intervene early. Those are the messages. And those of you who have seen more triangles than you can endure, go ahead and use concentric circles. It is perfectly okay. All right? But part of what we're learning is we really want you to deal with what all kids require and make it clear that you can do more. So the work that Chris Pinkney and Jessica have done, looking at classroom systems and academic seminar, it's a way of gearing up. It's a way of taking what we know, same basic ideas, but making them more effective and efficient. Part of what we're learning is if we're going to do this well, we need to be able to combine and integrate different pieces. And that is where the pieces related to combining academic, behavior, and mental health is going to be a core part. As you look today across the different sessions, look at how different pieces get combined. So I'm going to stop, give you time to get the blood flowing. We go to the next session in about 18 minutes. But here are the 2 things I want you to take away. 2 big messages. Don't stand up quite yet, Barb. All right. The first, I want you to be proud of what you've done. My message is that high schools in California are moving in the right direction. Dropout is going down, academic gains are improving, the social emotional competence of kids is increasing. Those of you who are implementing PBIS, you have demonstrated that it's possible and that it's effective. But what we haven't done is show that we can take it to scale and we can sustain it over long time periods. So I want you to be very proud of what you've done, but as a team, I want you to be thinking, remember, 3 big things I want you to take away. As a team, have we built consensus in what we are and how we're operating? 2, are we clear about how we're going to reach out and draw in the students? And 3, are we getting the tools that we need to build access to the rest of the faculty? If you do that well, not only will we be implementing PBIS, you'll be making schools more effective, more efficient, more equitable. I wish you well. Thank you.